A new enemy is approaching Cray, and this time it's Wandering Starhawk, Brandt, and his companions. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another set review. We just finished up with Bermuda, but we still got a lot to cover, so we're diving right into the new set reviews of the upcoming extra booster set that is Light of Salvation and Logic of Destruction, and that's a mouthful. And today we're gonna kick it off with the enemies of this set, and that is the whole Starhawk series of the new Link Joker support, and also the extra cards that were in this set for the overall Link Joker archetype. And they are a very interesting set of cards as they manipulate your opponent's deck, and for main reasons, that is they are going to reverse your opponent's trigger. So what you think is going to be a positive trigger is going to turn into a negative trigger, and all the other cards in this series are going to help facilitate the possibility of them drive checking a trigger. But with enough talk about the overall idea of this set, let's jump right into these cards, as there are some interesting things that we can discuss with the upcoming cards in this video. So first off, we've got the reprint of all the original triggers, so I'm gonna give them 1 stars as there's no real reason to reprint them as we just got the triggers not so long ago. But we also got the reprint of the draw trigger, and this is a little bit better as we have seen in the past that the draw triggers tend to spike in price when new support is coming out, as they are double rares and they're not getting reprinted so far in future support, so they need to get those from the secondary market, and those things are going to get expensive. Sadly, it's an SP reprint, so I'm only going to give it 3 stars as there are probably not that much in a case. They're probably only going to be 1 in some cases. Now, for the actual new cards and the things that we're going to talk about, we've got the new starter, and that is Starhawk Lurie. But sadly, it's a generic starter and I'm only gonna give it 1 star. It's just a palette swap of what we already got with the deleter, and we already got also one for the Cyber Dragon. So this is the 3rd one if we're not getting a 4th with Messiah. So yeah, 1 star. Then we get to the first of many cards that's going to screw with your opponent's mind. And the first one they're gonna talk about is this 7k grade 1 that is Sharp Ring of Collapse on a limb, and its skill is Auto Rigger Circle. At the end of the battle that it boosted a Vanguard, if your opponent's Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater and 2 or more Guardians were retired for that battle cost, retire this unit and draw 2 cards. So what's interesting about this card is that it's going to be a Vanguard booster, otherwise you cannot use it. So with a 13k body, that's a 20k attack. And your opponent is now in an awkward spot, as if they're gonna guard with 2 or more cards, you can retire your booster and then draw 2 cards off, so you're gonna plus. And you don't mind sacking this unit as it's a 7k booster, and 7ks aren't really that as powerful as an 8k. So you're probably gonna do a good trade-off. When you attack with 20k attack, they either need to guard with a heal trigger to make it a 2 to pass with a single card, or they always need to waste a perfect guard. Not every clan can do that, as since Axel and Force don't have infinite perfect guards. But also in the case that they're now either need to bet it with a 1 to pass with a trigger or a 2 to pass with a heal trigger, might let them open up for scenarios where you're going to get your triggers and you're gonna beat over their 1 or 2 to pass with this. So you can do some interesting stuff. But overall, I'm gonna give it 3 stars as it's a 7k body, that's not really that great, and it's also only on your Vanguard spot to make it viable. But with the interesting aspect of mind games with your opponent, it can be a very good card as it can cycle fast through your deck, and it is a +1. The next up, we've got a very powerful grade 1 that can shut down most rearguard reliant decks like Axel, and that's this grade 1 Lethal Shock Jetshaft. And it's probably gonna shaft your opponent back to next week, as its skills Auto Rigger Circle. When it boosts, cost Soul Bliss 1, and your opponent intercept as much as possible until the end of that battle. So basically, when it boosted, it doesn't need to boost your Vanguard, therefore force away all the grade 2s on the Guardian Circle. And mind you, all cards that can intercept. So you also have those vanilla grade 2 12k bodies that have 0 shield, but they can intercept, so they are forced to go to the Guardian Circle as well. And probably other grade 3s, like maybe with Bermuda, that has the intercept ability, those are also forced to go to the Guardian Circle. But at the same time, you can force them to overguard, as you can put this thing behind another grade 1, so it's a 16k column, but if they're forced to intercept with 4 cards or 5 cards, they're probably overguarding with probably 15 to 20k shield. And that's a good trade-off. As you know, they're probably going to guard that attack anyway. So if you can remove a lot of units on the field and force them to overguard, that's a pretty damn good value. And therefore, I'm going to give it 4 stars, as it's a very annoying card to deal with. And it's probably an axle breaker for this Link Joker support. The next up, another great one, and that is Treasure Child of Nuclear Magnetic Resonance. And her skill is Auto Rigger Circle. At the end of the battle that it boosted, if your opponent did not call a trigger unit up for that battle, put this unit into your soul, and one of your units gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So if your opponent could guard without triggers, you can basically put her in the soul, so you get a soul plus 1 and give another unit plus 10k. This is a very annoying card for your opponent to deal with, as you can force them to overguard, as they probably do not want to give you that 1 soul and also not to have some extra power onto the field. And if you just use her to boost another grade 1 or maybe even a grade 0, you're just gonna barely hit them, and they're forced to either, if they run the 5k draw triggers, to guard with that if they're lucky, and otherwise they are forced to put a 15k or 20k onto the field and overguard for 10k probably, to not get that extra power onto the field. So you can force them to overguard, or you get a soul for free and a plus 10k. But as soon as your opponent can interact with it pretty easy in most scenarios, I'm going to give it 3 stars, as it's not really that powerful, but in combination with some other cards, it can be really annoying for your opponent to deal with. And we're going to talk about those cards right now. And that's this grade 2 Black Light Whip Flickhitter. And its skill is Auto Rigger Circle. Once per turn, when a trigger unit is placed on your opponent's Guardian Circle for the battle your other unit attacked, cost Soul Blast 1, and this unit get power plus 10k until the end of turn. So basically, when they guard with a trigger for a different battle, you will get plus 10k for Soul Blast. So as you can see, this synergizes with the grade 1, as they are forced to put a trigger for her attack, but if they do not, this one will get 10k through her skill, but if they did, it will get 10k through its own skill. And she goes in soul and he Soul Blast. So it works with that. But also keep in mind the 7k grade 1 that we talked about earlier that can use behind your Vanguard. Well, they're probably going to use a trigger to guard with only 1 card. And if they do, you can use its skill in the same scenario that it will gain plus 10k. So there are some annoying things for your opponents to deal with, as they probably have no good way to guard efficiently for you to not get your beneficial effects out of your field. Overall, I'm going to give it 3 stars, as it is still reliant on your opponent's input, and you need multiple pieces onto the field to make it really viable. And it's also a 9k body, so that makes it a little bit risky on its own. The next up, a very powerful grade 2 from this set, and that is Whiteouter Vect. And its skill is Auto Rigger Circle. At the end of the battle that it attacked the Vanguard, if a trigger unit was not called during the battle, cost Counterblast 1, draw a card, choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or greater rearguards, and bind it face down. So basically, for a Counterblast, you get 1 draw, and you can bind your opponent's rearguard, but only a high graded one, but still, you can bind one of your rearguards. That's a lot of value out of 1 card. But still, your opponent can stop that by putting a trigger onto the attack. But what the good side about it is that it's a 10k. And it doesn't state that it needs to hit or whatsoever. So you can attack with it on its own for 10k against your opponent, even though they are grade 3, so they will not hit. But if they do not call a grade 0 to the Guardian Circle, you can still get the draw, and you still get to bind one of your opponent's rearguards. But also, if you use the grade 1 behind it, then both their skill can proc at the same time. So you can use its skill, and then you can use the grade 1 skill to put it into the soul and give another unit plus 10k. You can make some really annoying columns, even though they might not even hit if your opponent hit a defense trigger or something like that. I'm going to give this one 4 stars. It could even be tipped to the 5-star range, but it is still only 10k. So yes, you get value out of it, but it probably will not put out extra pressure unless you're making full columns, or you're going to put a force marker underneath this unit. But still a very powerful card. Now we're going into the support range for the new Brandt series, aka the Starhawks, and we're going to start off with this support grade 3, that is the Automata. And this unit has 2 skills. First one is Continuous Rearguard Circle. This unit gets power plus 10k, and your opponent's Vanguard get drive plus 1. And its second skill is Continuous Rearguard Circle. The trigger unit revealed by the 3rd drive check of each turn or more is put into the drop zone instead of putting it into your hand. So basically from the 3rd drive check and onward from that turn, so not attacked, it's gonna count the entire drive check for the entire turn. From the 3rd one and onward, every trigger is going to put into the drop zone. And this is very significant, as seen as it gives your opponent an extra drive check. And it can sound really bad giving your opponents more drive check, but The fact that they might discard it is at least in some reassurance that they are not going to get high defensive cards. So the best defensive cards are triggers. Those are going to be discarded anyways. They might get some key pieces as grade 2s, grade 1s, and grade 3s still go to their hand, but there's still a catch to it. But the major playability of this card lies in the fact in the grade 3 Brandt and the grade 4 Brandt, as those can reverse your trigger effects, and basically your opponent doesn't want to see triggers at all, and this card can force them to see those triggers. And that's why I'm going to give it 3 stars, as yes, it's a very powerful card in those right scenarios, but it can still maybe screw you over if your opponent is lucky and the first drive checks are triggers and the rest are non-triggers, so they're going to free plus out of you. The upside is that it's a 23k beater on its own, it has the force marker, and in some scenarios it isn't even that bad to ride it as your Vanguard, as we're going to see with Brandt, as in some scenarios Brandt is a vanilla right target that doesn't really do anything, and it's just an upset to go to your grade 4. So it's not that worse to ride this thing on your Vanguard either in this deck. So the first card of the Starhawks that we're going to talk about is this grade 1 Starhawk Giggers, and it got 2 skills. Its first one is Auto and Guardian Circle. When its attack does not hit, cast counterblast 1 and move this unit to an open rearguard circle. So you can defend with it, and when you successfully defend, you can call it to the rearguard circle for the counterblast cost. And you basically get a defense and an offense card out of one. And this is pretty good in an early game scenario, as you can guard to deny early aggression and at the same time build your field to put out early aggression against your opponent. And that's basically what you want to do with a Forest Clan, especially with Brandt, as you want to push them to 4 or 5 damage early on, as they're going to be in the kill range where they're going to die from their own triggers. And then it got the second skill, and it's act on rearguard circle, cast Soul Blast 1 Starhawk Lurie, so the starter, and look at the top card of your opponent's deck and you may bind that card. And that's a big one, that you can look at your opponent's deck and then decide to bind it or not. It is a powerful skill, but I'm not really fond about the way that it costs to Soul Blast the starter, which means that if you run this card 4 times in your deck, you can only use this skill once in the entire game, because you only run 1 starter. And that's why I'm a little bit, find the card not really that powerful, as you have only 1 time use of it in your game plan. And that's why I'm going to give it 3 stars. However, keep in mind, you can use this effect to basically see a trigger on top and then leave it on top, so their reverse trigger effect will go active, and you can see it in a moment what this can spell for your opponent. But there is an extra thing that you can do. You can basically psych your opponent, as anybody that plays against the deck knows you want to keep the triggers on top of your opponent's deck, so they get the reverse effect of those triggers. But if you just see a normal card, you can just see it, put it on top of the deck, and your opponent is going to think it's a trigger. So they're going to defend the life out of themselves to not damage check that card, because it probably can spill the death of them, especially if they're sitting at 5 damage and they think it's a heal trigger and that will kill them. So you can force your opponent to overguard each and every attack, and then when it's their turn, they draw the card and they see it's not the card that they thought it was, and now they're even in a worse spot, as the next card can potentially be that card, or they just wasted their entire offensive capabilities and they cannot kill you, and you can kill them the next turn. So there are some interesting mind games that you can do with this card and with a few other cards here we're going to talk about very soon. Then we also got another great one, and that's Starhawk Chirol, and its skills: Auto and Rearguard Circle. When placed, cast Counterblast 1, reveal 4 cards from the top of your deck, put up to 1 grade 2 or greater card with Starhawk in its card name among them into your hand, and put the rest in your drop zone. Overall, it is a good effect that you can cycle and search for a specific card, and it's basically the Starhawk series. The only downside is that it's only grade 2 and higher, so you cannot search either of the grade 1s, so no Giga and no Chirol, but you can search for Letaluk, Brandt, and basically Brandt Ringer, and it's probably going to be because of those 3 cards are the more powerful cards. The only downside is that you need to put every card into the drop zone, so you could be seeing that maybe you see no Starhawk at all and you see 4 triggers. Well, all those 4 triggers are now gone and you just wasted a counterblast. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky on that card, and that's why I'm going to give it 3 stars, as it can be really good with some consistency things, but I rather had seen something else that would not put everything into the drop zone, as putting 4 cards or even 3 cards is pretty heavy, if those are other key cards. Then we get to the creme la creme of this deck and the most powerful cards. And first off, we're going to talk about the grade 2, and it's Starhawk Letaluk. And he got 2 very interesting skills. And his first one's Auto Rearguard Circle. When your drive check reveals a card with Starhawk in its card name, this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So basically, both your grade 1s, this grade 2, and your grade 3 and your grade 4 all are gonna give you 10k if you drive check them in your drive checks. Like 70 or 80% of your deck will give power onto the field if you have this thing onto the field. And that is pretty big, as that can be really tough for your opponent to deal with, as soon as they also are fighting their own deck at the same time. So yeah, that can be really nasty. But what's more annoying is its second effect, and that is auto when it intercepts. If you have a Vanguard with Star Hulk in its card name, look at the top card of your opponent's deck. You may bind that card. You can see what they're probably gonna drive check, and you can then alter that drive check on the spot. And this is really powerful against something like Oracle Think Tank, as Oracle Think Tank is going to be in a really awkward spot against this deck, as they want to stack their triggers, but against this deck you actually don't want to do that. And at the same time, if you're gonna do that, they can then manipulate the deck even further and annoy you even more. Very versatile and very powerful card, and it's gonna be definitely 5 stars for me for this one, as I can see a lot of nasty plays with this, and it's just so much value in a single card. Now, we've talked a lot about triggers that your opponent doesn't want to see, or that the triggers are going to kill themselves. And that really sounds weird, as we're used to that you want to see triggers. Triggers are one of the more powerful things in Vanguard, especially in Standard, as they can sway the game in some unexpected ways in your favor. But as we're going to see with Brandt, the Grade 3, and with the Grade 4, that's no longer the case, as we have here Wandering Starhawk Ruler Brandt. And this Grade 3 has the following skill. Act, Vanguard Circle, cost, Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. Until the end of your opponent's turn, change the below effects for your opponent's trigger effects other than the power increase to critical. Your Vanguard gets critical -1 until the end of the battle. And heal, deal 1 damage to your Vanguard. So basically what it does is it changes the trigger effect, not the power. So the power increase will still stay the same. So if you try to check a heal or a crit, you still can give the 10k away. But the critical effect is changed, that instead of that you can give a single unit onto the field a +1 critical, it is changed that your Vanguard, so specifically your Vanguard, will get critical -1. So you cannot target them, it just instantly goes critical -1. So in most scenarios, that means your Vanguard doesn't deal any damage. And for heal, instead that you can potentially heal if you're having the equal amount or more damage than your opponent, it just straight out gives you a damage. What's even deadlier about this effect, because it's a damage, you need to do an additional check. And that can also be in heal. And that will then deal you damage, and that needs to be an additional check, and so on and so on. That can chain into multiple effects or multiple triggers. Overall, I'm going to give it 4 stars, as yes, it's a very powerful skill, but at the same time, think about it. It doesn't really do anything besides that. So if your opponent doesn't drive check any triggers, you just wasted the turn and didn't do anything. Yeah, you made a force marker, but it doesn't really do anything besides that. And this is the reason why Automata is not really that bad as a right target, as it can be in the same ballpark as Brandt, as they both do nothing. But this wasn't even his final form, as that is Wandering Starhawk Deity Brandt Ringer. And that's this Grade 4. And its skill is Act on Vanguard Circle, cost, Counter Blast 1, so it's a little bit cheaper now even. Until the end of your opponent's turn, change the below effect for your opponent's trigger effects, other than the power increase, to critical. Your Vanguard gets critical -1 until the end of battle, so that stays the same. Heal, deal 1 damage to your opponent, so that also stays the same. Draw, discard a card from your hand. So basically, when you get a draw trigger, you immediately need to discard a card. So you don't plus, you minus. And think about the KO Automata that I talked about earlier. If the draw was your third drive check, you not only need to discard a card because of Brandt Ringer's skill, but you also then need to discard the draw trigger you just drive checked because it's the third trigger of that drive checks. And it changed the power increase for front row triggers to the back row. So as I talked about previously, that you still get the power increase of triggers, so you can still give the 10k to your Vanguard for defensive and that kind of plays. If you run front, you're even denied of that, as the back row is going to get the power, so not even your Vanguard. But if you're going to be attacked and it's a defense trigger, you really are screwed, as you're now not even going to plus your Vanguard with 10k. So you have no purpose of a defensive trigger for that time. So that's why I'm going to give this card also 4 stars. Yes, it's very powerful, as it's even a cheaper cost than Brandt, but at the same time, if you think about it, it's a grade 4, which makes it a little bit less consistent, and from that point onward you can only go into the grade 4 for more force marker. And the only upside is that it's an act ability, but at the same time it is really luck reliant, as it doesn't really do anything on its own. It just screws with your bonus triggers. We've seen a couple of very interesting new cards for Link Joker. Overall, it was basically focused around screwing with your opponent's deck or with your opponent playability, as they now are in an awkward spot if they want to guard with certain cards, or if they are thinking that there is a trigger on top that can kill them, as now if they're sitting at 5 damage, they can potentially kill themselves if the dry check and heal trigger or the damage check and heal trigger, and that's not what you want to see. So there are some really interesting things with the deck, and it's probably more on the gimmicky side or a troll deck than probably actual competitive build. But overall, I like these new designs of these cards, and I'm really excited about trying this deck and doing all these kinds of shenanigans and mind games with my opponent. But I want to know what you guys think of these new cards for Link Joker. Are you excited for Brandt's return and the mind games and all the likes for Link Joker? So let me know in the comments down below what all your opinions is, and let the discussion going. As always, I want to thank my supporters over at Patreon for making this video possible. If you too want to support me and get exclusive access to some content over at Patreon, then head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one.